Yeah, we're back today. You didn't think we're coming back, but yeah, I'm back today. I did a little earlier rant a little bit, which was supposed to be on my other channel, supposed to be on the Great Debate Community channel, but unfortunately, I don't know what was going on. I couldn't stream to it. I couldn't get the Go Live light to come on for some odd reason. I tried everything, changed settings, rebooted, the whole 9 yards. It just would never work. So I'm doing this back on my main channel. But anyways, got Cheshire with us again.
I forgot to get a drink.
We'll go get one. We got plenty of time. I got coffee.
I'll get one soon enough.
It feels like a caffeine corner. It's not even Monday yet. But anyways, so check this out. So I was just on Twitter, and I was about ready to take a nap, but I ran into this gentleman. Can I use your first? Can I your name, or what do you want to go by?
Yeah,
okay.
I don't mind.
All right, we'll call him Kyle because that's his name. No relationship to my ex-partner that screwed me out of $60,000 and took my channel.
Kyle, no relation.
Yeah. No, Kyle, no relation to the other Kyle that got fraudulent conversion and unjust enrichment and all that other stuff.
Kyles are not good people.
Yeah, not that other Kyle. But Kyle, guest here, wants to teach me about epistemology, burden of proof, onus probandi, and how it relates to atheist. And as you guys know, I love this topic. I've had numerous discussions with it. Richard Carey has written 2 pieces on my blog. So this ought to be pretty fun because I don't think he's an epistemologist. I don't think he's a philosopher. I don't know what his background is besides criminal justice, I think. But first of all, can you guys hear me? Everybody make sure that it looks like
you can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah. I double checked.
Awesome. That's what I keep her around for.
I'm going to read out the first 2 tweets between the 2 of you to kind of get us started so we sort of know where this conversation started, and then we can go from there and see where it goes, and I may harken back and forth to what the discussion was. So Steven tweeted, "Atheists have a burden of proof. Don't let them tell you otherwise. Don't allow atheists in debates to say they do not have a burden of proof. It is epistemologically unsound and untenable listen, I'm a small person, for an atheist to claim that they have rational position but unjustified."
I love that. Small person, big words.
Kyle had responded with, "You don't know what an atheist is. You build straw men of atheists rather than listening to them and reasoning with them. Do you think Jesus, who left perfect glory to die for his enemies, would approve of this dishonesty, Steve? Answer the question if you can." I have one question that I want to ask to Steve before we get started. Sure. Why do you hate Jesus?
I'm a historicist. I'm not even a mythicist. I disagree with Carrier on his mythicist approach. I don't think you could use Bayesian the way he does for historical context, but I'm not a Christian, so I don't know where that came from. That was kind of odd. Josiah, $2 for super chat. Frack Kyle. Thank you, Josiah.
Frack Kyle.
So Kyle, Kyle, why don't you start us off on that? First of all, I'm not a Christian. I have I've had 3 channels. 2 of them were on the top 40 list for must-watch. Well, they're atheist channels, but they weren't atheist channel. Like this is not an atheist channel. We talk about atheism, but I have 2 in the top. The Non Sequitur show had 33,000 subs. Why do you think that I was a theist?
I kind of want to answer the question too.
Don't you dare! I know what you'll say.
So my purpose on Twitter is to be intentionally confrontational.
I get that. I'm not.
It's a shtick. I actually am pleased to meet you, Steve. Again, I use Twitter as kind of like the front lines of very difficult discourse.
Your dumpster fire place.
I tentatively have discovered that Christians like to use that same type of reasoning. That if you have the position of an atheist, you must falsify the unfalsifiable. Being a God claim. So I immediately was like, my targeting system must have. This is a clear.
This might be a productive conversation. I don't like the way this is going.
Yeah.
My audience expects a dumpster fire, not productive conversation on Sundays.
I apologize for that in advance as well, but I can give you some sport. I like to give sport.
Let's talk about it real quick about the theist thing that you said, because I do agree with you on that. However, the easiest way to dismantle when they say that is first of all, you have to explain to them what people mean by onus probandi and how it relates to what's called the burden of justification in epistemology. And I think a lot of theists get that confused. When a theist says, look, if you hold a particular position like belief, and you have to say that you believe that there don't know gods, or you believe that there is a God, and you have to prove anything, they're fundamentally misunderstanding the burden of proof. It's kind of like the Big Bang. The Big Bang wasn't a bang. It wasn't an explosion. The burden of proof has literally nothing to do with proving in epistemology. It's not like a court case. Do you agree with that?
I honestly wouldn't know. I think in terms of how a court would proceed with data, or a scientific laboratory proceeds with its data. So when I was a Christian, I did use the word belief all the time. Like, I have belief in this, or I believe in the assurance of salvation, and things of this nature. And knowledge had become just, you know it or you don't know it. But in reality, in day-to-day life, your anticipation of your reality and your belief, quote unquote, I will start saying what you're convinced of, are slaves of your senses. They unfold in real time as you're living life from day to day. You know, I believe the chair is in front of me because I can see it. I have stubbed my toe on it, which is my senses telling me what to be convinced of. So saying belief has been a knot in my language that I've been trying to evict, to replace it with what am I convinced of? And what I have discovered is that whether you say you're an atheist or whether you say you're a theist, there are degrees of conviction across a large spectrum of, I'm somewhat sure God is there, but I don't know yet. I am absolutely sure God is there, but those people still fall on their knees on Sunday and reaffirm their faith to God. Yeah, I sinned. The most on fire Christians, the most staunch believers will still reaffirm their faith and pray and ask God for forgiveness because they struggle with doubt too. They are at 99.9% certainty of God's existence. And the atheists, the Dan Barkers on the other side of the coin, who say they can prove God doesn't exist, still wrestle with Russell's teapot. There may be a teapot orbiting Jupiter. We can't prove it's not there. It might be, but it's highly unlikely.
Can I ask you?
I am convinced that Elon Musk is actually going to put a teapot.
I think they will do it one of these days
in space, or NASA's going to just to be a dick.
There's so much to unpack there. First, I mean, do you know what Russell was trying to say when it came to the Russell teapot? I mean, do you know what his? Because he really didn't formulate a really coherent conclusion with that. But do you know what the gist of it was?
I do. I understand it to mean that, well, what it taught me about how to see my life was that it is possible, even if you think you have all the proofs to the contrary, that some type of thing of the proposition that you disagree with might actually be going on, except in some cases of deeper language when you do use philosophy. You can disprove some things without a shadow of a doubt, but mostly for like day-to-day life, like walking from my chair to my kitchen to get something to drink. Don't stub your toe on the chair. I'm convinced the chair is there.
That's not really what he was going for. What Russell was going for was this. He held that if something was unfalsifiable, it's an unfalsifiable proposition, that the onus was on the person trying to assert that the entity or the object did not exist. It's an existential claim. His writing on that has really been kind of turned on its head. There's been numerous papers out there that Garvey 2010 is a very good one to read.
I see.
And basically, for example, I believe there's no teapot up there. I don't have to remain agnostic on that particular issue. That proposition is false, that there is no teapot. I could justify that by saying, look, my understanding of the space is that they have to account for everything, for weight. And they have to have everything for have a purpose. There's no purpose to have a teapot in space. Therefore, man has never put a teapot in space. There you go. I'm perfectly justified to believe that there are no teapots in space. I don't have to remain agnostic on a non-falsifiable proposition. Falsifiability really doesn't matter when it comes to beliefs as much as people think it does. That's what Russell was going for.
I don't think that I actually agree with him. If I misunderstood him, I don't actually agree with it.
Do you believe that?
I think that it's really easy when it seems with a lot of analogies, especially in philosophy, that there's a lot of what seems to be the obvious answer to what's being said. And then sometimes there's a little bit more to it once you start getting into the logics of the argumentation itself.
Is this like Occam's razor?
No, Occam's razor.
No, not quite.
Occam's razor is called the law of parsimony. Basically, all that basically says is that you don't want to unduly multiply your axioms if you don't need to. You basically if you have two competing hypotheses with exactly the same predictive abilities, explanatory capabilities, you take the one with the least amount of assumptions. Basically, is what it is.
But, okay, then that is close to what I don't believe. There's a teapot orbiting Jupiter.
But do you believe there's none?
No,
right.
It's possible.
So look, this is where I think a lot of atheists get confused here.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, the whole thing on beliefs, right? We're talking about epistemology of what it is to have a belief. And when you say you don't believe, okay, that's fine, but it's not really telling anybody about your positions. And so why is it you believe? Why is it you merely just don't believe? I believe there's no teapot up there. I've told you why I believe there's no teapot up there.
Oh, there's definitely reasons to not think there's a teapot.
Okay, so but that's not convincing you enough?
It is. I'm convinced there's no teapot.
So you believe there's no teapot.
But if I tried to write a formula for you in, say, mathematical terms, or to prove with it without any reasonable doubt of certain things, I don't think it's possible to completely.
Well, hang on. Why do you think that's necessary? Look, as soon as you say you're convinced, that is the same thing as saying I believe it's true. That is what convinced is. I am convinced, therefore I think the proposition, or I believe the proposition is true. That's the proper epistemic disposition toward the proposition.
Okay.
So Steve, this might be, I might be able to clear this up.
Sure. She's the mediator that speaks my language to non-follow-off kind of people.
I'm only here to help facilitate. The difference between knowledge and belief. I think that might be what is the hang up here.
I'm not necessarily thinking that's the case. First of all,
it is a little bit.
Well, the difference between knowledge and belief is pretty simple. Knowledge has certain criteria that belief doesn't have. Belief only requires that you have a conviction that you think the proposition is true or false. Knowledge requires a certain set of conditions. In the most simplistic version of knowledge, people will canonically use what's called the justified true belief system, which is the proposition is true, the subject believes proposition, and the subject is justified to believe the proposition. But I don't really want to get into the knowledge aspect, because I think when people start talking about knowledge, they're in a different domain altogether. They lose.
Well, that's what I think he's saying, right? He's saying that
because he doesn't know.
100% say that he knows for a fact that a teapot isn't out there, but you can believe that there is not a teapot out there and justify that belief. Yeah, and not even be close to knowledge.
Look, if you're at 60, 70% conviction, that's fine to have a belief. You're perfectly justified. You don't have to know it.
That's it. You just said 60 to 70%.
In that ballpark. I mean, there's no line of demarcation.
Right, but that's touching on what I was trying to illustrate before when I was explaining degrees of certainty. Mm-hmm. There's this thing called an electron microscope.
Yeah, I'm familiar with a scanning electron microscope. I got a background my background, I used to train people to operate nuclear power plants. I'm familiar with the electrons.
Super cool to look at. Like the pictures are amazing because when you look at an ant's antenna, for instance, let's say an ant's antenna, we use the words ant's antenna to describe the thing we see. But if you zoom in on it close enough, it has its own chasms and antenna and things that begin to dissolve the certainty of your description of the ant's antenna. Immediately, it's like, now we have to further subcategorize and granulate our language to explain what this thing is, an ant's antenna. Because of all the components making up your conviction or your convincedness that thing is an ant's antenna is only at 99.9% as long as your senses make you think that, because you're a slave. Your convictions are a slave to the senses, or at least mine are. I like to be able to touch and feel and see a thing and actually appraise it in real time.
I'm a little confused by this, though. I don't know where this is going. I don't
It's
know the relevancy here.
It's just
a matter of that if you can't know something, you shouldn't believe it.
Well, that would be ridiculous because there's many things we don't know.
no, that's not really what I'm saying. No,
Okay.
I apologize. I don't think the word believe is useful at all here.
Okay, well,
I
let me tell you what belief is
the
useful
word itself
for.
is a nod.
Okay, all belief is that you hold a proposition to be true or false. That's it. That's it's called epistemic disposition. That's it. If the proposition is the sky is blue and you believe you think it is true that the sky is blue, you believe the sky is blue. That's all the word means here. That's it. It's an epistemic disposition.
I can look out my window. The sky is actually very blue right now.
So
my eyes
are you
have told me
convinced
this,
that
and
it's
I am
blue?
now.
It's snowing.
I'm very heavily convinced.
All
I
right, so
say
you believe
I'm
the
way
sky's
up there.
blue. There you go.
No, don't. I'm trying to cut believe out.
But
Word
why?
is a
I mean,
nod.
that's the word
I don't need
that's
it anymore.
used.
I
No.
don't need it. You guys know that I'm pretty well convinced the sky is right now blue.
But-
And that's fine enough for me to share with you and what's the term? Solidate?
But in order
Create
to know,
solidarity.
hang on, Kyle. In order to know something, you have to believe it. That is, knowledge is a subset of belief. If you do not believe it, there's no possible way you can ever have knowledge.
Well, I don't know the sky is blue right now. I'm at 99.99998% because I haven't looked outside for a few seconds. But I'd say I'm still heavily convinced
Okay.
it's blue. There could be
I'm
clouds now.
almost concerned that we're falling into solipsism.
Yeah, it's like, do you believe that I exist?
No, I don't. I am not a solipsist.
Well, hang on. Do you believe
I
that?
don't think you are one, but I think we're starting to get close to falling down the solipsism rabbit hole.
Do you believe that I
Maybe.
exist?
Oh, yes.
Do you
Well,
have, so you
not
do have
believe.
beliefs?
I can see your webcam. I can hear your
these are
voice.
Yes, but it's true. It's yes or no. Do you believe that I exist? It's
No, it
yes,
isn't.
yes or-
That's my
It's yes or no.
proposition is that no, my proposition for the sake of argument is that knowledge is on degrees of certainty between 2 points of infinity in either direction.
Okay, but you have a problem
Just
here,
like
Kyle. Let me explain to you your problem here. Okay, it's something called the law of excluded middle. Are you familiar with it?
The what?
Law of excluded middle. It basically states.
Not fully, no.
It basically states that a proposition must be either true or false. That's it. There's no other positions it can be. Now, other types of logic, like multi-valued logics, then yes. But in regular classical logic, a proposition can only be true or false. Okay? So, if the proposition is Steve exists, where the indexical is me, I'm Steve. So, Steve exists. That is either true or false. Okay? There's no other options in logic. And you said you like logic, so this is logic. So there's only three real epistemic statuses you can have with respect to that. You can believe that it's true, that I exist. You can believe it's false, or you can have a position either way. So out of those three positions, and I don't care what you call them, what is your position? Is it true that I exist? Is it false that I exist? Or do you have no position either way?
The way I'd formally position it is that I'm certain enough that you exist to show up and talk to you.
But
and
that
I can
doesn't answer
see
the
you.
question. True, false, or neither. Those are your only three logical options. You don't get any others.
Well,
So for
I don't want to pressure
again-
this too much because I think we've kind of made the point.
No, it's okay.
I
It's okay.
have a question for you, just for clarification. So if you're willing to say that you think you have knowledge up to 99.999%, what do you do if that percent starts getting lower? And at what point does it switch to being not true?
Because so that's
You see what I'm saying? Like, where
yes,
is
so
the
let me-
gradient switching over?
I can try to illustrate better by
So if you're willing to say,
you can take almost anything that you're looking at, like the COVID pandemic or trends in the market, and your level of certainty on things changes in real time. So I can see your face through the webcam. I can hear your voice. Why should I'm not acting like you don't exist. I'm responding to you. I showed up. I'm talking. But that's all you need. It's useful enough for us to solidate.
Super chat.
I don't have to go on and to postulate now Steve equals 1. Steve, what does that? How does that help me?
so if you saw a name in a phone book, is that enough information to make a knowledge claim about that person?
Yes, it's close enough to be useful, very useful to contact. Yeah, it's
Is there any piece of
relevant to my reality.
information? Is there any piece of information that would not be enough to not be convinced that this person exists?
Oh,
Like,
well,
how do you start running into trouble like this is a name in a book?
it has to do with general trends and what you've seen over time, because we have memory, right? We store events that we've seen and touched and felt and tasted. Like, you know your favorite food because you've tasted it before. You can anticipate it to be good, like if you like avocados. My memory can be used to prepare me for predicting things that haven't happened yet, that are going to happen. So say you told me there's a person named Steve Armitage. There are Steve Armitages. I'm looking through my memory right now. Yes, I knew one from church. Yeah. So it's likely. But then you start telling me other things about Steve Armitage, like that he glows in the dark. Oh, okay. Hold on now. That's fascinating because I'm looking through my memory, and the only people that glow in the dark are like in fiction stories, but I've never met one in real life. So I'm at like 15%.
I don't know where this is going. I'm not trying to shut you down, but this is completely irrelevant to anything.
It isn't irrelevant because it answers her question. When do you flip from one? When do you flip from one side of the gradient to the other?
Well,
you do not flip. A gradient is a spread of values that you transition from back and forth.
Let's talk about this real quick because there's so many different rabbit holes we're going down real quick. So real quick, I got 6 different things planned here. I mean, it's just you going down so many different rabbit holes, man.
I apologize. Okay. I'm trying to illustrate my position.
I'm gonna ask you a question. One sec. Failed in Engineering Mania for $5 says, "See, this is what I love about this channel, Cheshire Vic and Steve McRae, and this is calm, reasonable discussion. Lure it." Thank you, Mania. We love you. Okay, okay. First of all, do you think that I wish we could go back to the other thing, but since you're talking about this, do you think anything has a certainty of one?
Yes, one is something we created, a concept to help us share.
Okay, so what would be an epistemic
other.
certainty for you? I guess one would be you're going to consider one epistemic certainty, I would imagine, right?
Well, I'm not sure what epistemic certainty is.
No,
because
you know what I mean. You cannot be wrong.
No, because I think it can be shown in science that the one in tangible space doesn't exist by the electron microscope.
Number. It's a real number. I mean, the one exists on a real number line. It's an abstract concept. But so you don't think there's certain things that you cannot be wrong on?
Of course, I think I could be wrong, for instance, about the color of the sky, since I haven't looked at it.
What
for a
you
while.
can't be wrong on. Give me something you know of a certainty of one that you cannot be wrong on.
What would that want? Like a one apple is
an example would be you said earlier that you know what your favorite food is.
Yeah.
Can you possibly be wrong about what your favorite food is?
No.
For an example.
It's an incorrigible belief. You cannot be wrong on that. It's true in the.
You can change. Like, for instance, I never liked onions growing up, but they're kind of good.
Sure, but that doesn't make you wrong.
Right, it doesn't make you wrong. It just means you changed. Also, like if I say X equals X, I cannot be wrong on that. That is a true statement that exists in all possible worlds. I just cannot be wrong. So we can have by definition, right? It's an analytical a priori knowledge. But we know this, right? We cannot be wrong on that. Now you could be wrong about the justificatory conditions. That's called fallibilism. But the equation itself is impossible to be wrong. It cannot be wrong in any possible world. So if you're using that as your metric, as in one, I'm gonna ask him this, Chesh, and you're gonna kill me. But
I know where this is going.
So when you're talking about gradient, okay, and this is I am gonna put you on the spot here because this is math.
That's fine. No, it's okay.
And I told you, like, my background was, in science a little bit. So, 0.99 repeating. So if you have 0.9 repeating in infinite decimal expansion, does that equal 1? Because if you're approaching 1, what's the closest number to 1 that's not 1? I mean, how would you have a line of demarcation there? What would be that?
So this is going to be hard to explain, I think, as I'm piecing it together, but I know what I want to say. Mm-hmm. I think numbers are constructs to help us describe our reality, but they aren't They aren't something in space that can be looked at. They just help us
They're
describe
abstract.
space.
Yeah. But they are,
So-
by the way, they are constructed. You know how to construct them? They're actually, this is, if you don't never heard of it before, there's two ways, there's multiple ways of constructing numbers, but the two most common kinds are called Dedekind cuts or called Cauchy sequences. So if you look up a Cauchy sequence, it actually tells you how to construct a mathematical number. It's a fun fact for my audience here. They like learning stuff. So look up Cauchy sequence. Mon, you can.
How do you spell it?
Numbers are like part of our language.
Cauchy. It looks like It looks like Cauchy, but it's Cauchy. It's pronounced Cauchy sequence.
It's really, numbers are part of our language.
Chauchy, I believe it is. Yeah.
Coach, sorry, I keep cutting
But
you
that's
off.
a mathematical way of looking at sequences to see what they converge upon, and if all real numbers are defined by Cauchy sequences. But when you're approaching
Sounds
one,
like a Landon word.
there's no such number that exists next to one that isn't one. There's no, like, what's the highest number next to one that is one? It doesn't exist. 0.99 repeating is equal to one. They're exactly the same number. So it's kind of hard when you have these little gradients about belief and knowledge. And I find that you having a probabilistic approach. What I don't understand is when people want to throw away logic. I mean, logic is a condition for ingredient for rationality. And I see a lot of people just throw logic aside when it doesn't suit their needs. Like I tried to explain to you before, there's only three logical options for any proposition. You believe it, you believe it's true, you believe it's false, you suspend judgment on it. You don't believe. That's it. That's all you get. And if you can't focus on one of those answers, then you're not doing logic at that point. You're just saying, look, I don't care about logic. I'm going to be irrational. So when you're willing to tell somebody, look, I can't even answer if you exist or not, they're going to look at you like, what the hell's wrong with you? I mean, you ask me a question on any kind of thing, I'll give you a direct answer. I believe you exist. I'll even call it a knowledge condition. I know you exist because I actually have a theory of knowledge I can actually predicate that upon because I understand epistemology. Other people may not be able to do that. I mean, they might have more difficulty to understand knowledge conditions, or they might be a skeptic. Skeptics hold that there's no such thing as knowledge. But I believe you exist. I don't have to sit there and go, hey, is the proposition, Kyle, true or false? I mean, you look foolish when you do that. You just go, yeah, it's true.
Of course, for usage in day-to-day life, but if we're discussing it and breaking it down to really explain what our minds are doing when we do appraise things and decide if they are convincing to us or not, that's a different discussion. That isn't just as simple as saying, well, yes, of course, Steve, I believe you were there, okay?
Would you?
Of course.
Okay.
I would have to. Why would I even show up to talk?
Okay, so here's a good point.
You'd be surprised with some of the people we've spoken
I actually wrote a blog. I wrote a blog entry called "The Problem of Not Believing."
I imagine so.
I'm not even kidding. It's called "The Problem of Not Believing," and I actually it is a little bit sophistic. I admit this. I'm not very good at sophistry, but this was my attempt at sophistry. But it actually is dedicated to people that believe that, that don't believe that I exist, which is, I've had dozens of people, like literally dozens of people say they don't believe that I exist. So it's weird. But let me ask you this. Okay, so this goes back to actually the original topic. We have come full circle now. The burden of proof.
Cool.
So
Okay.
this I'm going to explain to you this way.
Okay.
You would agree that if you hold a belief that I exist, you have a burden of proof. Would you agree with that? It's a positive claim, right?
Yeah, I'd say if I was convinced of something, I'd want to be able to show people that I wasn't nuts. Like, yeah, Steve exists here. Look, I have my monitor is here. You can see him.
Yeah, it's
They're
called the
probably gonna be like,
causal
"That's
theory of truth, or causal
They'll
theory.
be deep fake. Deep
so-
fake. It's
Awesome.
not real.
And we would
I'll be
agree
like,
with that. I think everybody would agree that, look, and there's different burden of proofs. There's not just one. Matter of fact, in the law, there's two different kinds. There's burden of production and burden of persuasion. Burden of production is to bring some charges, and burden of persuasion is to convince the jury or judge. But in epistemology, the term onus probandi is used a little bit differently. It's basically to hold a rational position. So I would agree with you. If you say, look, I believe this Cheshire exists, and somebody says, well, why do you believe that? I would have to give some rational reasons why to justify that. I don't have to prove she exists. I don't do a mathematical proof. There's nothing to do with proof when it comes to burden of proof. That is a misnomer. Just like Big Bang isn't a bang, the burden of proof has nothing to do with proving anything. It just means how to justify. This was a long time ago, about the 2nd century, from a guy named Sextus Empiricus when he was working on what's called the problem of the criterion of how to do epistemic justifications. And we all agree. So we're on the same page here. Look, Cheshire exists. I believe it. You believe it. Bingo, right? Now let me ask you this.
Highly convinced.
Now let's say you didn't believe that she existed. I believe that she did. You don't believe that she existed. And I ask you, Kyle, dude, she's right there. You can see her. You can talk with her. You can engage with her. Why do you think she doesn't exist? And you look at her and say, I don't have a reason. Do you think that's rational?
No. Their position to me would be you have a flaw of approving your evidence, like something, because right now I can see both of you on the Google Meets, so I have reason to believe Google Meets is working.
All right.
Why
So
would
you're
one
saying
be true and the other be a lie?
Yeah, exactly.
If that was my position, I'd be wrong.
So Kyle, you're agreeing right now that if I asked you, hey Kyle, you don't believe she exists, and you would think that would be kind of odd, right? And I
would want that person to explain what their position was in terms that involve evidence.
That's the burden of proof atheists have when they have lack of belief. There you go.
We did it!
Yay! Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to our side.
I'm excited. Does everybody want to say
Everybody's
Happy
the same
Mother's Day to my mom?
A moment was had here. Yes. Hi, Mom. Happy Mother's Day, Mom. We love you. Adopt me.
I can't hear anybody.
Steve asks you to adopt him.
Pardon?
Steve asks you to adopt him.
Okay.
See, she would. I know she would. She'd probably trade. She'll do an equal swap, me for you. I know she would.
He wants to trade, so you get him and I'm gone.
Oh.
I am housebroken. I cook a little bit.
He said he's housebroken.
Oh.
But Intrigue Feline points out we've managed to convince him in 30 minutes. That's got to be a record. Yay!
That has got to be a record. We're explaining the burden of proof in atheism. Oh,
your favorite subject.
There is a burden of proof
that's
for
all it
anyone
is.
who.
Where's the person?
That's it. You just, and by the way, you met it. How hard is that? That's your burden of proof. That's your burden of justification. Why do you hold the belief? Why do you lack a belief that God exists? Well, the reason I lack a belief that God exists is because I've had competing positions arguments between theists and atheists. I look at the theist arguments. I think they have, they need some work. Atheist arguments, they're not exactly stellar either. I kind of somewhere in the middle after evaluating all the arguments, and aggregately, I fall somewhere in the center. Therefore, I don't believe that God exists, and I don't believe that God does not exist. I'm an agnostic on the position. That's my burden of proof. There you go. I'm done. I explained why I don't believe.
That's the same position I hold. I would like to be able to tell people why I don't believe.
Well, that's it. That's all your burden of proof is, why you don't believe. That's what a burden of proof is.
So just because if you take the position of an agnostic and say, I'm not convinced this way or this way, you still have a burden of proof to demonstrate if you're trying to convince people why you're in that position. Yeah.
Those things are not proofs that God does not exist.
We don't talk about proofs. Again, burden of proof has nothing to do with proof. Burden of proof in epistemology means your reasons why you hold a position. That's it. Has nothing to do with proving anything. Let me tell you something, Kyle. The only people that need to prove something, is the ones that say, I can prove this. If I say to you, I can prove to you 0.99 repeating is equal to 1, I have an onus to then demonstrate that to be convincing, right? If I want to have a burden of persuasion, I want to say, hey, Kyle, I want you to believe me. I can prove to you 0.99 repeating equals 1. Then I have to prove it. And by the way, I can. And I can do it in geometric progressions. I can do it in algebra. I can do it in calculus. I've got that proved down to a science. But that's when I have to prove something. If somebody says that you have to prove something and you're not claiming that you can prove something, that is called a straw man. Because you're basically building an effigy for something that is they're not arguing. Right?
Yes, I wait for them to tell me who God is. I typically wait.
Point. Sorry. There's a really good point that Intrigue Feline says. It's just start calling it the burden of justification.
I prefer she's right. Look,
catching people.
I prefer burden of justification. I really do, because that's what it is. But I mean,
I think I might as well also.
Burden of proof and burden of justification mean the exact same thing in epistemology. There is no distinction. I have this discussion with Dr. Alex Malpass, and his first question was, what would be the distinction? And I'm like, there wouldn't be. He's like, there you go. I'm like, he's like, there's nobody defines them.
It's an issue more of communication, not of epistemology. In that case, it's an issue of if atheists are getting confused because the word proof is within the burden of proof and they're getting hung up on a word,
Right.
it might be beneficial to use a different phrase, even though it means the same thing.
Absolutely.
To help communicate that thing.
And here's the thing, though, it takes away. And by the way, thank you, Monty, for $2 for Cheshire's mom.
Atheists are going to be saying we don't have the burden of proof, and you respond with what? No, well, you actually have a burden of justification.
Yeah.
And they might be willing to accept that, which means they also accept the burden of proof, and it's just going to. There's a snowball effect here of confusion.
Manya sent $2 for your Cheshire's mom. Happy Mother's Day. So Kyle, yeah. So here's the thing. You do recognize that your position is agnostic on the proposition, right? I mean, you can call it anything you want, but in philosophy, that's called agnostic on the proposition. You agree with that?
It would depend on how you're using the term agnostic.
That you don't have a position either way. You neither believe or nor disbelieve.
On the position of what?
Any God existing.
My position on God's existing at this time is very highly unlikely. I would have to meet them.
Right,
or
no,
see
I mean,
some sort of evidence
but
of them.
again, true, false, or neither. You don't get any other options. The proposition, at least one God exists, right?
Okay, so for the purpose of solidating and conveying the most accurate information to my neighbors, I would say there are no gods.
Okay, so you're not agnostic like me. So here's the thing. Guess what? We don't have the same position. You are an atheist. You are a.
What I just said was cynicism. I don't actually know that there are no gods
No,
neither
forget knowledge.
does anyone else.
No, stop. Don't use the word knowledge. We're not talking about knowledge. You don't have to know anything to believe. Knowledge is not required to believe anything. Knowledge is a subset of belief, not the other way around.
I don't know how they're nested that way.
Because
you should be able to justify your what you think is reality should be able to be shown.
Right, but that's not knowledge. The word knowledge.
So that's the justification part, not the knowledge part.
That's the only thing to me that matters.
But Kyle,
we just had a whole hold on. We just had a whole conversation about this, and you agreed with us that there was a difference between what you use to justify your belief system and how much you could possibly know a thing. So you can believe and you can know that your favorite food is this, and believe that your favorite food is this, and those can be two separate things, and you can change over time, and then you can still have the knowledge that this was your favorite food and now this is your favorite food, and you believe that this is now your favorite food.
You just got to be real careful, because beliefs can be false. Knowledge cannot be false. Knowledge must by definition be true. Okay. Hang on. So the reason why knowledge is a subset of belief is because it goes back to, like I said before, justified true belief, which is the more canonical form of knowledge. In order to say I know this to be the case, it has to meet certain conditions. 3 conditions. You have to believe it, you have to justify it, and it has to be true. So if you don't meet those conditions, you can't say you have knowledge. And so because believing that is a necessary but not sufficient condition for knowledge, that's why knowledge is a subset of belief. So knowledge is irrelevant. We're just talking about straight beliefs. You believe there's no gods.
Right.
You are an atheist.
Let me put it this way. Are you convinced? Are you convinced that there are no gods? Take belief and knowledge out of it. Are you convinced about it?
You're convinced?
There we go.
Yes, I am. That's highly unlikely.
Yeah, you're
okay.
So
you're convinced.
You're just what's called a strong atheist, which is just atheist. That's it.
It is functionally close to that, but I don't agree that there is a word atheist that's sufficient to convey what a person's position is on something. You can't just say that that's an atheist, so here's what they think.
Do you know what
you're hearing from me? I am colloquially known as a atheist because that's the simplest way for me to get on board and into the fray. But there's nuance to this.
But Kyle, you and I don't have the same position, so why would I be labeled the same thing?
Well, we can't label ourselves at all.
Well, yeah, I'm not an atheist.
We have to cross-examine each other to find equal ground and consolidate.
I'm fine with that, but you're okay with me saying that I'm not an atheist, right?
Yeah, I don't mind. I don't think atheist as a word is very useful. I think get it out of there. Just like believe, just like knowledge. The thing you know is say we're talking about knowledge. Mm-hmm. My knowledge is a slave of my memory and my senses in real time. I only know what I can touch. Like
you're using knowledge, but see, you're doing what's called equivocation, and you don't need to. Hang on. I don't want to get into. Hang on. Equivocation is a big issue when it comes to knowledge. You just moved from epistemology to what's called explicit knowledge. We're not talking
Yeah.
about explicit knowledge. You're using
Okay.
you're using knowledge
Okay.
to mean information.
Yes, I did.
Right.
I did do that. I
Be careful of that,
apologize.
because when we're talking about knowledge, we're talking about a very specific word in epistemology, meaning that you have met specific conditions in order to say that it is not. I know that P it's called, and when you say I know
Something-
that P, you're saying you met all three of those conditions. That's what that actually stands for.
Knowledge
So-
is something. Knowledge is something you are so convinced of that you act on in the moment.
I don't think so.
That's what knowledge
can-
is.
In fact, there's something called Moore's paradox, where you can say it's raining, but I don't believe it's raining, and that's actually not a
But
contradiction.
that could be a flaw of the senses or the memory, but it's still something you're convinced of enough to act on. You see, you have to account for people whose realities are skewed and people that live in conditions that are like in suffering, people in hospitals, blind people,
Well,
people
I
who
get
are
that. Your
born
senses-
without
So I
legs.
have a
Your
question.
senses could be
If-
wrong, sure.
For knowledge to be in your opinion or in your framework, for something to be for something to be true, for something to be knowledge that you can't be wrong about, does it have to be perfect?
I don't think that's a thing.
Yeah,
Perfect
that's not
isn't
what
a
I'm.
thing.
Okay, that's fine, but that's not what I'm asking.
Okay.
So
Well, what I'm trying to avoid is arriving in a place where there is the actual one. I don't think there is a one,
X
because
equals
if
X. That's certainty. That's one. I mean, how much closer to one can you get than
as
that?
defined for usage when we convey data to each other, go get me one apple from the fridge. Okay, mommy,
Yeah, but
that's useful in real
but so
time
is
for
that-
us, but that's
the,
what the number is
do you know
for.
what, again, do you know what the law of identity is?
But if you look at an apple or cut it or zoom in on it with an electron microscope, like I was trying to illustrate before, the one isn't there. One apple
No,
doesn't.
I get that. Look, first
you
of all,
only use it.
I get that. Look, okay, numbers are abstract. Now, unless you're some kind of
Yes.
mathematical Platonist, which is
Dismissing it as,
fine.
oh, they're just abstract.
Well, they
That's
are
not
abstract,
true.
right? They're numbers. They're
Well,
numbers on a.
hold on. This isn't a dismissal. Yeah,
Yeah,
I
let me
promise.
explain it. We have the
Okay.
real number line, right? These numbers represent a position on that real number line. They're abstractions. Okay. Now, there's people have argued, like if I remember correctly, Quine's indispensable
Real number line? What is a real number line?
from negative infinity to infinity. All the reals.
Both constructs to help us describe and use things in day-to-day life, but infinity and zero are useful to a degree, but not like counting apples.
This is mathematics. I'm not going to
We're
spend a lot of time in
we're getting
mathematics,
into
but
the trouble of the definition of the word
yeah,
real.
we're going to get into the definition of
Real
infinity and
number
zero.
does
We're going to be
not-
here a
isn't
long
the same.
time.
Yeah, no, hold on. A real numbers in terms of mathematics are not the same as you would colloquially use the term real versus
Yeah, they're not real.
imaginary.
They're not. Real means they're not imaginary. Look,
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to make sure that we didn't get caught up in that by accident.
There's
No,
imaginary
that's not what I
numbers and there's real numbers, and all real numbers are a subset of complex numbers. Okay, so R is a subset of C, and complex numbers basically are numbers where you have a real component, then you have an imaginary component. If the imaginary component is 0, then all that's left is a real component. So you have like A plus BI, right? So, and I'm going back on my math here a little bit. So if I have A plus BI, and the B is 0, what happens to the imaginary component of that complex number? It just has the real number. So reals are actually a subset of complex numbers. 2 is a complex number. 5 is a complex number. That people don't think that way.
Philosophy is math.
But they really
Yes,
are. They really are. All the reals are complex numbers as well. But just means the imaginary portion happens to be 0. But that's what they mean by real. It exists on the real number line, which is a continuous called the continuum hypothesis. That there's no divisions between the numbers. It's basically a bunch of transcendental numbers, is what it is. But there's no
my goodness.
discontinuities, right?
Real numbers, transcendental numbers, imaginary numbers. All the numbers were imagined. They were all imagined. They are all just sub-languages that we
Wait.
Well,
use.
no.
We use them to build things.
Stop. This is
We
look. It's Kyle. I'm not trying to
asserting
Kyle, hang
that
on.
there is the one or
I'm
the
trying not to
two.
be dismissive here, but this is where I hear a conversation go so far off the rails
Yeah,
that
we're
I want to
going
bring the
way
interlocutor
off to the
back
side.
because you don't want to go down this route. Because if you do this when a theist is listening, a theist is going to go, "Oh my God, what the hell's happening to this person? Which school do they go to? It's that bad."
Wait, what? What is theist?
Because
Why?
what I like to do is I like to help people have
trying to help you have the
discussions with
conversation.
theists, you know.
Yeah.
And you're basically poo-pooing on math right now, which is, first of all,
No,
poo-pooing
I'm
on logic
not.
is.
I was just about to explain how math helps us communicate so effectively that we can build bridges, skyscrapers, and rocket ships with it. It produces extreme success and growth in society and in solidarity. Math is one of the best languages ever invented. It's so sufficient and so useful that everyone on the world uses it everywhere all the time. What I'm saying is that it was imaginary from the beginning. It was invented by humans to communicate with each other. These words, these A1, A2, A3, are all imaginary for usage, but not for asserting that there is some cosmic one or some ultimate one, like the atom. Nope, we divided the atom. A planet. Nope, planets are built of multiple gases and cores and strata and different things. A star. Nope, there's actually black holes and white holes maybe, and supergiants. The one isn't there. We use math as a language to create solidarity with each other. But there isn't this cosmic one or this absolute oneness thing that exists.
What is this, a position on the real number line? You're making it sound like it's some kind of mystic woo-woo.
But it's like saying that.
No, I
okay,
didn't.
well,
I gave it the greatest credence ever. It gave us our modern society and cars and AI. That's
I think
amazing.
there's a fundamental difference in what we're talking about at this point. Mm-hmm. One, the concept exists whether we observe it or not. However, to attribute one
you don't observe a concept, but
one ultimate thing where they're the lowest thing it can be is one. It seems to me to be an abstract.
Yeah. All right. So let me ask this question to the audience real quick, because this was a question that got brought up. And by the way, I'm not convinced this has a correct answer. Okay. I see a good argument either way for it. I have my own particular position on it. But here I'm going to ask the audience to see what they think. Okay. Is mathematics a subset of logic, or is logic a subset of mathematics? And of course, justify it. Now, my position has been logic is a subset of mathematics. It's called mathematical logic. However, there's a reason to be had that all mathematics is some predicated on some kind of logic. So, I mean, you could actually maybe argue that they're a non-proper subset of each other. But what do you guys think? I mean, I don't know if there's a right answer to this. It's a philosophical question.
I think that I'm confused by this person, by Kyle in here complaining on Twitter about word salad after what we just listened to.
Yeah, that was a lot of word salad, Kyle.
But oh my god.
Yeah, this is.
Oh yeah, I like word salad.
I can tell. I mean, like ranch dressing and Thousand Island together, and some probably olive oil too.
Just balsamic vinegar. Balsamic vinegar.
But yeah, I don't know how we're going down this rabbit hole, because here's the thing: you actually agree that atheists have a burden of proof, which is a first step.
Right, that's great.
That's great.
Hold on now, you switched it up on me. We're calling it burden of justification.
Well, the same thing. There's no difference.
I don't agree. I disagree with that. When you said burden of proof initially,
you're disagreeing with the semantics. You're not disagreeing with the concept. The semantic
what you meant. How am I supposed to glean the understanding of your usage of proof when you really mean you're justifying something? It's okay to justify an action or justify something you think is true, but to prove it in the sense of a courtroom.
We just said we don't have to prove anything unless you have to say you can prove something. How are we back on proving something?
So before we get back down this rabbit hole, you agree about justification. The burden of proof in epistemology is the same thing as the burden of justification. That's what it means in epistemology. It's just a matter of disliking the term proof.
Okay, that's cool.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fine.
I now know that proof equals justification.
Exactly.
Even though they're spelled and look completely different. That's not useful for me. That's kind of like a gotcha. See, now they're the same.
It's not supposed to be. No, it's never. It always was the same.
If it wasn't a deliberate trap, I find it dishonest to just suddenly.
It's not. No, it's not. It's a matter of understanding the topic. Look.
Yes.
I like reading. Hang on, Kyle. I like reading, right?
Use of a word.
I like reading. Right? I go to Google Books.
Steve, before you go down this route, can I please ask this person, how much do you know about the history of philosophy, and like where these terms came from and why they were called what they were called when they were initially written.
I said from the beginning that I'm only interested in current usages of these words and how
These are
they are
current
useful
uses
right
of these
now.
words. These are like.
Right.
No, I'm not using burden of proof the same way I would use
So
burden
you have
of
stipulative
justification.
definitions.
I don't know how you're
I want
defining
to
them.
ask.
I
I
don't
want to
agree
ask
with
Kyle to
them.
do me a favor real quick. Can you please do me a favor real quick? Can you open up a Google tab, type in burden of proof, then open up another tab and type in burden of justification?
Okay.
Can you tell me what the difference is between those two things?
Well, a simple Google search is probably not going to do it. You have to really look.
Probably
into
not.
literature
We'll have to find. We'll have
burden
to
of
make
proof,
sure that
it
he's
always
got
goes
the
to
right.
legal stuff, and that's called onus
Yeah.
per
Yeah, we
bondi.
want to avoid.
Yeah, it's
look
gonna
for
be different.
philosophy
Right.
specifically. Philosophy specifically.
I see. So we get into a bunch of unannounced qualifiers on how these words are supposed to be contextualized.
Well, no.
Burden of justification doesn't even have an entry in the dictionary in the first tab.
Okay,
I'm
this is
jumping
why-
in on
this
this
is
one.
why-
Hold
this-
on. Hold on, Steve. Steve, please.
Oh, the Stanford Encyclopedia.
I have a question for you.
Public justification.
I have a question for
Is
you.
the second result from Wikipedia. Justification, epistemic. It continues on, but they're not the same.
Kyle, take a breathe.
Kyle, I have a
breathe,
question
man.
for
Go
you
ahead,
real quick.
Shush.
Okay, I apologize.
The word theory. Is there more than one use of the word theory?
Usage? I
Yes.
don't think there would be.
You don't
No,
think that you could say
there
you have a
shouldn't be.
theory of something,
I
and
think-
then scientifically the word theory means something else?
Well, hold on. Since we're Googling things. Theory.
What about the word faith?
Well,
Do you think
I
there's
like
more than
theory.
one kind of faith?
Stick with theory, because what do you think? What do you think theory means in science, Kyle? You know what I mean?
Well-
I mean, it's understood. Again, like I was saying, I like to read. If I see a paper and I go read a paper in science and it says the word theory, it's conveying something from the author, right? What is it supposed to convey in a scientific paper when he says the word theory?
A theory is like a complex explanation of something observed,
It doesn't
like
be
a
complex.
phenomenon.
It'd be very simple, actually.
Yeah, well, I call
Sure.
it complex.
But it's an
'cause
explanation. Theory is a well-substantiated body of evidence and facts that can be repeated and demonstrably over and over again. That has predictive ability, basically. It explains,
And
right?
what is music theory then? What's a theory in music?
Theory in music.
Like
or
circle of
theory of
fifths,
music.
minors, majors,
Yeah.
harmonics.
The theory of music would be us trying to explain how music
Right.
can have like a predicted impact or therapeutic effects and things like. I don't
No,
know,
not
maybe music
therapeutic.
theory-
No. Music
I
theory would
don't
be
know.
like,
Music
if
theory is
you're
about
in
the
B flat
technical-
major, what are you going to be your notes? What's your circle of fifths?
Yes.
What's going to be flattened if I want to do a harmonic minor versus a melodic minor or something like that? That's
You can
music
have
theory, right?
scientific theories
things
within
make-
music.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of
Things
science in
like
music
always-
actually. But real quick,
Yeah.
failed in engineering for $2. Kyle, for once admit when you've been corrected.
Oh, yeah.
So
I
on the
do that
side there, so
sometimes.
do you agree that there are different usages of the word theory that are all applicable? And they're talking
Yes.
about different things.
But creationists use theory to mean a guess or just
A guess or an idea?
If you amend the word theory with music as a prefix, then it can mean other things, deeper things. But you would have to talk it out with whoever you're talking about music theory with, I think. Even if there's someone in your class, people in music theory discuss their own
I agree with
subjects
this. Perfect.
Perpetually,
Fantastic. So we're on the
to the-
same page.
to get to the bottom of what music is, how we can predict its effects, how we can produce new
Sure.
sounds, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure. So within the context, if we're talking about theory and we're talking about music and I say theory, you make the assumption that I'm talking about theory. If I'm talking about biology and I'm talking about science and I say theory, you're going with the context that I'm referring to a scientific theory, right? So if we're talking about philosophy and I say the burden of proof and I'm using it, you're reasonable to assume that we're using it in the definition and within the heading of talking about philosophy.
Oh, that you actually mean burden of justification, even though you even acronized it, BOP. See, that threw me off. If I ended up in some kind of weird trap with that, I kind of understand where I sit
It's
now.
not a
Got another
trap.
super
You
chat
didn't
real
fall into any kind of trap.
Hey, we're not trying
Well,
to trick
I-
anybody, by the way.
Yeah,
Manya
there's
for
no trick
$5
here.
says hang on. She says when most people hear the word proof, they think certainty. Clearly, no one has a burden of to demonstrate their position with apoplectic certainty. apoptotic is basically unassailable truth. And failed engineering again. Justification, on one hand, makes it clear that one has a burden to back up their claims with good reason. Yes, that's all it is. That's it. Good reasons why you hold or withhold judgment.
Well, I like that. I think that's great.
That's all it is.
I think
that's what it is. That's what it is.
Why run from that? Look, when I say that an atheist, when I wrote my blog about the atheist burden of justification that Carrier had actually agreed with, it was predicated on burden of proof being the same thing as burden of justification. So when people say atheists don't have a burden of proof, it shows a very starch fundamental misunderstanding of epistemology.
Yes.
You like science, you said, right? You're a science guy, right?
I think science is awesome.
Awesome. Okay, so would you agree that in science, if people started bastardizing certain words, it would be very confusing to people trying to understand the topic, right? If I said an electron is actually a neutral particle that exists in the nucleus of an atom, right? Wouldn't that be kind of confusing? I mean, if I said, that, I don't know, quantum has to do with ecology or something. That would
Music is actually a good example.
Yeah, I mean, these words mean something for a reason to convey things in science, right? This is why scientific literature is very, very specific in their terminology. Why would you think that philosophy would be any different?
If we stick with music, a good example is the number sign. A number sign, if you're working in mathematics, is a number sign. If you're on a telephone, the number sign is a pound. Or is it the pound? Well, whatever. It's pound. One of the other ones. And and if you're talking about, if you're on social media, it's a hashtag. So depending on where you are and what the context is, then sure, it can have different meanings. So if you remove the word proof and examine just the word proof within the context of a philosophical conversation, and they're talking about the burden of proof, and you remove the word proof and decide you want to nitpick that you don't like the way that term is, I mean, it's fine to make an argument, a semantic argument about the utility of it and say, hey, maybe it would be more beneficial for the sake of communication to say this or this. But as long as you agree with the concept and understand the concept, then there's no issue.
Yeah, the thing is, I said,
there is no issue.
But hang on,
you're right.
The problem is that, like I said, if you want to go reading about this stuff, right? When you read something on and it talks about the burden of proof, it helps to understand what the author's talking about, right? So you may not like it. Hey, you know what? I don't like calling it the burden of proof. And you can go to somebody and say, look, I have a burden of justification. Okay, great. There's nothing wrong with that. That's it.
Absolutely.
That's it.
If you decide that after this conversation, you decide you want to call it the burden of justification moving forward, as long as you understand the concept, then there's no issue whatsoever. Hell, there's a decent chance that we're going to change it and start using that because it
I would rather have it be burden of justification. It'd be a lot less confusing.
Frankly, yeah.
But when you read some of the literature, they don't call it necessarily that. They call it the burden of proof.
Right.
And so, I mean, I want people to be able to understand. It took me 6 years to understand even the basics of the stuff, and I'm only at a basic level. I mean, I barely scratched the surface, and I've been trying to understand this stuff for a very long time. And I read an awful lot, but I want other people to be able to as well. And so I write my blog as a layperson, because I am a layperson in philosophy. And the reason why I write it is because I want to show people that as a layperson, if I can understand it, anybody can, really. I mean, it's just I want to be able to relate it in a way that the average person can understand it. And when my blog gets crapped on by these new atheists that have never read it or don't understand it or say it's word salad, but then somebody else who comes along and says, this was actually a pretty good piece, who knows the topic, they're not really doing their due diligence, and they're really not learning anything. And so when you go into these conversations, like, for example, I mentioned the laws of logic, it helps to have a fundamental understanding of those, especially in the conversations dealing with theists. Because if a theist looks at you and says, look, here's a guy that's throwing away logic, I don't think he's going to have a rational argument about anything. Why am I going to talk to somebody who doesn't even know about basic logic, that is not is basically an illogical person, right? That's why I think there's everybody who's involved in these discussions, if you want to talk about atheism or theism or whatever, learn a little bit about philosophy. That's the tool of the trade. That's the tool of reason.
Well, you're teaching it. You're part of the solution to the
I've
problem.
been trying 2 years, and you know how much crap I get for it? You know how hated I am in the atheist community? I have been told I am the cause of schisms in the atheist community. I am the destructor of the atheist community. I don't get it. I have had... I have thousands of people that listen to me, and I have thousands of people that hate my guts, all because I have a schism, because I'm trying to explain things to people properly. And then I have these atheist activists like Aaron Ra, who I used to be really good friends with, and Matt Dillahunty, who
people
been on my show,
theist.
who says that I'm just wrong by fiat. And by the way, I have actual logical proofs, and people have been telling them, wait, Here's a logical
Wrong
proof
about
Steve
what?
has.
They
All this
wouldn't
stuff,
just-
like the burden of proof. Like,
Oh, you're not wrong about it all.
well, thank you. I'm aware of this, but I appreciate it.
You have to
All right, how many
qualify-
minutes in? What do we got here? 114. What do we got? 58 minutes under an hour. Yes.
It's just a matter of qualification and context. Like in my instance,
Okay, so-
I understand the word justification to be something very
Right.
good. That's something I would say I would love to lift the burden of justifying
Sure,
my
that's fine.
43% certainty of the stock market in this
Yeah,
quarter.
and let me ask you this real quick.
Sure.
What do you think is more
Right.
effective? Let's say Chessware's a theist here, and she believes God exists, right? And you say, and let's look from our perspective. I just say, hey, Chess, I'm gonna play the part of the atheist right now, okay?
I believe in Pazuzu.
Hey, Chess, you know what? Your God doesn't
Nice.
exist. I think your God is completely made up. Let me tell you all the reasons why I think your God is made up, and you give all your justifications, right? You can the logical problem evil, evidential problem evil, divine hiddenness. Just aggregate arguments about why. Look, I've had 6,000 gods posited for 6,000 different things. None of them None of them actually were the case, right? We realized that lightning wasn't from Thor. And by the way, we've never discovered anything about your science guy. You like discovery. We've never discovered any properties of a god. They've always been ascribed to us. They've always been told to us by somebody. This is the attribute of God. We don't go out and say, hey, look, we've discovered that this attribute is very similar to like Superman, right? We didn't discover Superman could fly. Somebody who told us Superman could fly because that's the character. So you could use these arguments. What's more effective against the theist? Running all these arguments, explaining them why you think that their gods don't exist, or you to sit back, and I don't mean you specifically, but you, the new atheist movement, go, hey, I don't believe you, Chesh. I don't believe you.
No,
I don't believe you. You have all the burden.
Right
you have to do all the work because I just don't believe
Yeah.
you.
Agree.
You're
That's all they do.
absolutely right.
Yeah.
That's
Steve,
all they do.
I actually like what you're saying a lot. And the reason I say that,
This is why I have a following. I have a new convert. Cult. This is why I'm telling you, we need to discover what we need to figure out what kind of shoes we're going to wear or what color. It's got to happen. I'm going purple myself, but
it's taken me too long to like figure you out. You like a good concept going here. So
It's surprising. You should see the number of these new people that coming from these atheist groups that say that religion and atheism and all of this is not philosophy.
Yeah. And here's the thing, Kyle. You obviously were an ex-theist, right? So can I ask what denomination you were?
Oh man, full blown street preacher, fundamentalist.
Okay, evangelical.
Oh, yeah.
Were you a young Earth creationist?
Yeah, man, I was pedal to the metal for Jesus.
Were you a young Earth creationist?
Oh yeah, dude.
Okay.
Earth
So
was
you're
6,000 years
all right. So you're
old.
familiar with Kent Hovind?
I grew up on him.
Okay.
I love Kent.
Oh well, Kent hates me, by the way.
I mean, I love him now, but in a sardonic, cynical.
do you know my history?
Check out Dapper Dino's channel.
Yeah. Do you know my history with Kent?
Do I know what?
My history with Kent
I'll link
Hovind.
it later.
Not specifically, but you seem
Kent's been on
so
this channel like 12
familiar.
times. Ken and I used to have debates that I hosted for him. I mean, I've destroyed Kent. King Crockett, if you've been with him, destroyed Kent 3 times on my channel. So Kent's not a fan of me any longer. He doesn't want to come back. I don't know if you really know my history, but I was mentioned in the Journal of Creation by Dr. Ken Humphrey, or to me, Dr. Humphreys. I was mentioned in another journal by Dr. Lachelt. The Younger Creationist movement knows me very well because I adamantly against Younger Creationism. I can tell you right now, it's bullshit. Younger Creationism is bullshit. Everybody that I know that does a wonderful job promoting critical thinking, like against young Christians, like Jackson Wheat, Paula Gia, Tony Reed. These guys are much better than even I was, and so I've kind of moved away from that, recognizing that this is their aptitude, right? I mean, Jackson Wheat is just mind-bogglingly good. R.J. Downing is very good too. But he just got information on his fingertips. So I kind of took a step back from Younger Creationists, but I started on YouTube debunking Ken Hovind. I mean, but what I was going to say is the reason I'm
and
telling
it's
you
also
this,
his fault that he's back.
Yeah, as soon as Ken got out of jail, I brought him back.
Oh,
that was me.
Amazing. I actually am very thankful for that.
By the way, do you know Nephilim Free? Ever heard of him?
I love just the meme energy of Kent Hovind debates and how
do you know who
clownish it is and how frustrating it is to watch him.
Kyle, do you know who Nephilim Free is?
No.
Oh, okay, never mind. All right,
Oh, thank God.
Yeah.
Don't do that to
Well,
him.
the reason why this was a long way
This
to get
is
to
why
where we're
you
going.
can't make friends, Steve. This is why we
Right?
don't have nice things.
This is where the long way to get around this. The reason I brought this up, Kyle, is because when people leave theism, right, a lot of them are looking for exactly the same thing. They want somebody to tell them what to do. They want it to be led. They want to have another ideology to substitute for the one that they had. I've seen this numerous times with atheists, and they look to an atheist activist. Look, I have the utmost respect for Aaron Ra. He's brilliant. He's brilliant in philogeny, and we used to be really close. What separated us was the fact that he doesn't understand philosophy with a damn. And he's gotten so many things wrong, and he's such a prescriptivist that it's cost us our friendship, which is a shame. Because I have a lot of respect for the man, and Aaron,
he's strong, man. He's got a good type of approach. He can get in there and wreak havoc and cause people to really
philosophy.
think.
He's the worst at philosophy. And
with on the scientific side, like high school students that are dealing with
he knows stuff in biology. Sure.
He's like, no, this is how clade. This is
he knows clades. He knows.
That's very good. That's a very useful thing for the community of Christians who want to break out. From my perspective, Aaron is very helpful.
But my point being is that I see a lot of atheists look to Aaron and look to Matt Dillahunty, and they go, look, this is my new priest.
No, that's wrong.
No.
They can't do that.
I'm telling you, though, that's what I see. For example, when Matt Dillahunty says I'm wrong by fiat, nobody questions him. Although when my audience, right, because I have a lot of people that watch my stuff, they go, "Hey, a minute, here's a logical proof, Matt. This is valid. This is sound. This is logic. How do you refute it? You can't just say it's wrong by fiat." And he won't address any of my logical arguments. He just says, "Steve's wrong."
Yeah, the last thing he did, I believe, was he sent out a video from a guy who was saying that somebody in our community's been lying about being assaulted.
Well, worse than that, this guy that actually Matt Dillahunty actually used a video from a guy that actually admitted to me 2 years ago that I was right about all this. He only keeps it going for views.
I think
I have it in writing in his email. He's like, hey, you're right about all this. You're 100% right. I've been wrong on this. The logic, your logic is correct, Steve. But I've been told that to keep this going and fight to the death to you on it because people wanted the views for it. That's it. I'm not into that.
Yeah, you're absolutely right to encourage any exiters, and those are people who are trapped in religious thinking, to become free of people telling them what true things are and pursuing what true things are by justifying through evidence.
And you agree? Do you agree with this? Look, but nobody has to believe me for shit. All they got to do is go look into themselves. I'm not a preacher, right? I mean, I was a theist like you. I was Mormon, but whatever. Still believed in God. But I don't want people to take me at my word. Unless it's something personal, right? I mean, I have friendships. If I tell Cheshire something personal, she's going to take me at my word just like I would for her because we have that rapport with each other. But I mean, when it comes to like factual stuff, it's like, hey, here I have 1,000 citations. When that citation list I sent you, I've read all those papers. I've had a lot of them on as a guest. I've had Dr. Appian. I've talked to Dr. Malik. I've had Malpass on. I've had Dr. Josh Rasmussen on. These are actual experts in these fields that we enjoy talking with. And so when these atheist activists say Steve's wrong, nobody's really giving them pushback on it except for people that have listened to me go, well, if he's wrong, demonstrate it. Because here's the atheist motto. If you can't show it, you don't know it. And yet anybody who's ever said I'm wrong, not a single solitary frickin' person has ever showed the logic to be wrong. Not one. And even Stephen Hoyt has tried, and he can be very much a pedant. But the best thing he can come up with is that my phraseology is a little off because he's hyper technical to a degree that just drives me maddening. But he still says, well, Steve, but Steve's right on this. This is basic logic, you know. I mean, I express it maybe a little bit heuristically, that it may not be extremely 100% technically correct, but in a way, a person is going to understand it a lot easier. But yeah, I mean, I get really annoyed when I see these atheists just throw away my logic without even trying to evaluate it or come up with the dumbest things I've ever heard. Oh, well, you haven't proven your first premise. Well, my first premise is an axiom. What's wrong with it? You have to give me a reason why you're rejecting the premise. You just can't say your premise isn't proven.
Yeah, like if you write wrong math, a teacher needs to be able to identify where the mistakes were made. And that's why they ask students to show their work, right? Like, I want to see how you process
show me
this
where the
equation.
logic's wrong.
Show me where you're finding the disagreement. So
Right.
you ever see Dan Barker's very popular? When I was coming out of the church, he was saying things at the time that I actually didn't agree with. Like he's saying, I can prove that God doesn't exist. I think
that's very difficult. I think atheists maybe look, whenever you say you have to prove God exists or does not exist, you're going to have a hell of a burden. Because now you actually have to prove something. Now here's one way of doing something like that, though. Let me read the super channel. I'll tell you one way to do it. Reed says for $5.
Reed.
Actually, can you read this? I got a message.
You agree with Steve, Kyle? Welcome to the embodiment of Cephas. Now help us roll hundreds of pounds of stupid up the hill for eternity.
Wow, rude.
Yeah, it's pretty accurate.
Okay, so what I was going to say on this, I totally lost. Oh yeah, so look, there are some gods you can disprove. Okay,
Yeah,
let me give you an example.
If you say the wildest things about them, then
well, let me give you an example.
Remember earlier when I said the sky might still be blue, but I haven't seen it in a while? And the more qualifiers you add to your proposition, the more factors of authentication you need to prove that the whole statement is true. It's not just X equals X. It becomes X, Y, Z plus this equals this.
Let's walk it back a little bit. Let's walk it back a little bit. Going too far.
Okay.
All right, so look, if I say to you that, and again, this is going to sound weird because normally they posit a deity as a metaphysical necessity, which means it must exist in all possible worlds. But let's just say that there's a God that exists, and the Earth is 6,000 years old. That God is contingent upon the Earth being 6,000 years old. We've already falsified that. That we know the Earth is not 6,000 years old. I have knowledge of that. I will state it as knowledge, right? Because it's true. I believe it, and I'm justified. It is knowledge. The Earth is not 6,000 years old. It's around 4.5 billion.
Yes.
That's knowledge. That particular God does not exist. If they're going to say that God is contingent upon 6,000 years,
highly convinced.
That's one of the very few times. The logical problem of evil would be another one. Some God that has all the properties that also has evil as well. That's a little bit. That's more of what's called an inconsistent logical system. But you can say, look, that particular omnibenevolent God can't exist because all the propositions cannot be true at the same time.
Right. Yes, like two contradictory statements.
Yeah, so when you're an atheist and you're having these discussions in general, that's one of the reasons why it's very good to find out which God they're talking about. What are they?
Yes.
What is the theist actually proposing? Because that changes what you're arguing.
Yes.
Now, there are going to be some people who make really broad, vague claims about what God may or may not be. And those ones are a little bit, you're not going to necessarily be able to disprove functionally that God doesn't exist. But the justification to not believe it can be quite simple in that, like, you're not giving me something solid enough for me to properly assess whether or not that particular definition is feasible.
Yes, all of that, yes.
Yeah, it's not too complicated. I'm just really glad you were actually able to come on and have this discussion rather than on Twitter.
Hey, I tell you what,
philosophy
props to
is kind
you,
of a little
dude.
bit too much for Twitter, man.
To you. You have no idea how many people cower away from this stuff and chicken
Cheer in the chat for
out.
Kyle.
Yeah.
Oh, they should join. Tell them to come and talk to you.
I am
both
impressed.
Of you guys.
You've earned my respect. I don't understand half of what you're saying, but
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
I didn't mean to confuse.
It's okay.
I'm also working these concepts out in my head, as I go, because having believed in God, I can analyze my own memory to explain to other people why I did, and that can help them. I think we should help them. I don't think religion is poison or cancer or anything like that, but I think the little nerve loop in the mind that says I know because I know because I know is part of a malfunction that can be cured if you just learn how to discuss what they believe with them. Like, for instance, I don't mind that there's a God, because God killed everyone in a flood, including babies and pregnant women. Right? This is a horrible thought. But if a Christian tells you that their God has done this, and they believe that's true, all you have to do is remind them, and then that will begin to help them to become passionate for the things they actually like, and pursue the things they really want and not have fear of hell and punishment.
And that's fine. Look, I'm a multifaceted kind of person when it comes to these types of discussions. I don't have a dog in the fight. I really don't. God, this doesn't exist, whatever. But
Really?
you're a science guy, right? So I think somebody who combines science and philosophy has double the ammo if they're going to go into these types of discussions. I mean, I don't know if you've ever done debate, but if you ever gone against a debate, a theist like Darth Dawkins or
Oh God! Yeah, of course that's what you go to.
I don't know what's some theists I've gone against. Wayne Fillmore. I went against Wayne Fillmore.
This is the first thing I've ever done. You're my first person
I
I've
popped
ever
his cherry. I have literally popped so many cherries in my life. It is amazing. People have never been in Hangouts before. They didn't even know what a Google Hangout was. WizBiz, $2. Let's go, Kyle.
Yay! I said that.
By the way, Chesh,
I said that, and my mom freaked out and was like, "Let's go, Kyle."
Yeah,
no.
Chesh, by
And
the
I'm
way,
like, Kyle.
There's
Different
somebody named
Kyle.
Kyle in here, and there's somebody named
I'm gonna
Curtis
cry.
in the live chat. It's I can't
Blow
deal.
your
I can't
mind.
deal with this. It's help me.
Yeah, no, Kyle. If you're not looking at the live chat, they're cheering you on and just being like, "That's very good insight. Thank you for coming." They're really happy that you came to talk to us.
I'm wow.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Welcome to the fold. Like I said, we have
I'm kind of nervous now. I didn't know there was a live.
We have Skyclad meetings every Tuesday. Wear white, and we have to figure out what kind of shoes we're going to wear.
Steve has a really neat tall hat.
We got girls though. You like girls? We got boys too. I mean, we don't judge.
Yeah, I like everything.
All right.
Can I freak him out since we're just wrapping up at this point?
Yeah, we're
Go
up.
ahead.
There's over 100 people watching.
Hey,
Now,
that's good.
By the way, my other show, we used to get about 1,000 people watching. I had a big audience,
Look how
man.
sad Steve is. Steve just misses non
I
sequitur,
do.
as does everyone.
We're gonna get it
getting
back.
there.
I've been
We're
involved in
getting
I've been involved in a huge lawsuit. It's like a $100,000 lawsuit, and so I sued my ex-partner, whose name was Kyle, who stole my channel, stole $60,000. So
I apologize on behalf of Kyle's.
yeah, I want my channel back. You know.
I like this, Kyle.
Yes, so this is why I have a pretty big following on this particular channel here, is because a lot of them came over from that channel. Plus, I don't know if have you heard of something called Reasons to Believe?
I don't think so. It sounds
Have you
like
heard of
something.
Dr.
I
Hugh
would-
Ross? He's an astrophysicist.
No.
Really? I mean, he kicked. I mean, go find a debate called. It was Dr. Hugh Ross and Kent Hovind. It was called the Anchorman Show, I believe it was. It was one of the greatest debates of all time. I don't agree with Dr. Ross on a lot of things. He's a really nice guy. He honestly believes what he believes. I know him personally.
Yeah.
But he destroyed Kent Hovind. Just obliterated him. Well, anyways, his organization is called Reason to Believe. We're starting a new show. Me and Dr. Fuzz Ron, who's a biochemist. It's going to be right now. It's once a month because of the P word going on in the world. But I don't want to get demonetized too soon. But
Covfefe. It's Covfefe.
Covfefe. We're going to call it Covfefe. And so that starts in July. That's going to open us up to about a huge audience. I mean, they get about 500,000 watching of all Christians. And so we're going to be trying to get more Christians. You see, here's the kind of thing that we're going to be doing. They have a ministry, right? So they want to create Christians. I don't know what they're thinking, because I'm going to be trying to get people to think critically, which may have them leave Christianity, right? So it's a new show called Agree to Argue, and we're going to argue on these topics and not be beholden to any kind of like agenda. I mean, that's going to be awesome, because let's see what happens. Are people going to go, hey, I'm going to believe Steve, and maybe I'm going to leave Reasons to Believe, or I'm going to believe Fuzz and become a member of Reasons to Believe. I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be awesome, right? But we're going to have a whole new audience of theists to come over and talked about philosophy and talked about science.
Res Instance for 10 said, Kyle's everywhere hath been redeemed this day.
Oh, no, there's no
and then
redemption.
Intrigued Feline jumped down in there with a caveat that said, not all Kyles.
Yeah, not all.
No, never all Kyles.
Hashtag not all Kyles.
I'm going to throw this out here. One of my dear friends who's been very busy with I guess camping and stuff like that. He's one of my dear friends, and he's really good at philosophy. I mean, he's really an awesome guy. He put the seal of approval on this. If you know who Ozzy Ramsey's Mandius
Ozzy.
Ramsey's the second
Hi, Ozzy.
is. So he's actually, have you got his thumbs up on this? That's pretty good, man. Yeah.
What does that mean? I'm honestly.
He's just a very well-respected.
My cherry was just popped.
He's a philosophical kind of dude. He doesn't like being called a philosopher, so I just call him a philo dude.
Philo dude.
What does he have a YouTube channel?
He did. Well, yeah, he does. He doesn't do much on it though. He builds igloos.
I can watch things.
I sent you 2 links
He has some
in
great
the
videos, actually,
internal
back in the
chat.
day.
Oh, okay.
Kyle, I put 2 links in the internal chat for you. One is the Hugh Ross and Kent Hovind debate.
Love that
And
debate.
the other one is
Yes, that one's amazing.
to Dapper Dino's channel. Dapper Dino has a lot of hilarious Kent Hovind stuff. They do something called Kent with Bent, and I would recommend checking that one out.
It's funny.
He got Kent Hovind to admit that he doesn't know what a dinosaur is.
Of course, he did that.
And I got Ken Owen to admit that he's not
Kent
credited to
would end
teach
up in a
anything.
hole that deep. He could actually dig a hole that deep and then die there.
Ken
And
always says that he
Dapper
taught
Dino
math.
did that?
Ken always said he taught science and math, high school math, and I got him to admit that it was not credited. Shocker, I know, right?
Yeah,
Surprise!
there's a lot of many deep holes for him to trenches. Yeah, Kent, that poor guy. He should just be honest. It would be so much better. I think he's like.
Oh, he's a con man. He's a con man. He's a narcissistic con man. Yeah, he literally is the epitome of narcissism. I mean, it's all about Kent.
Yeah,
He has slaves
such a
working
shame.
for him, pretty much.
His kids
We're at
and
the
all
8-minute mark. I think we should probably get, if there's any questions in the chat, if you
Yeah,
can send us
questions.
questions, that'd be fantastic. Kyle, if you have any questions for either of us, now is the time
First,
to
I want
ask.
to know how we have 100
whatever
people
you're
watching. We only have 36
Come back
likes.
next time.
36 likes, guys. Come on. I actually have turned. The last one I wanted the likes and dislikes. I wanted to show Sherelle the trolls that we get over here. But here I was bad. This actually I did forget to turn them off because I will be turning them off. But until I do, get some likes. By the way, I did have an episode earlier today, Chester. I don't know if you watched it, but I ranted for a while. Nothing major, but I kind of gave the people just the very basic of what's going on, so they don't think that like Cheryl kind of like stood us up or anything like that, which she really clearly didn't.
No.
Yeah, she's thrilled to do this about talking about some stuff.
I don't know how she could have stood us up when she asked to record a promo with us.
And she was perfectly on time. She said she was going to give me a link like on the minute. I was, wow, this is like, I like people like this.
So, an intrigued feline wanted to ask Kyle if, Kyle, you're going to tweet about this now that you actually kind of have had a chance to interact with us a little bit more.
Come to the new.
I imagine I
convert.
must. Yeah.
Yep,
But I don't.
Because Kyle's got honor.
And by the way, do you feel more comfortable being an atheist now? I mean, you hold the position of no gods. You should own it. You'd be like, look, there are no gods. Let me tell you why. You don't have to know it. You don't have to be certain of it. In fact, knowledge doesn't even require certainty itself. There's actually two forms of knowledge. There's the strong acceptance and weak acceptance. Just go by the weak acceptance. That's normative. So just say, look, I'm not claiming I know there's no gods, but I believe it. There's no gods, and I'm going to tell you why. And then give them all your reasons. That's it. Boom, you're justified.
Yeah, honestly, that's how I exercise what I am discussing in formal, I guess what you'd say, mathematics. When in practice, it's like, no, bro, fuck God, he doesn't exist. Show me where he is. Come on.
Well, by the way, you asked that question earlier, which
of course he's not there, so get off my doorstep.
There's problematics with that, though. I mean, because when you tell a theist, hey, look, show me God. If the theist isn't saying that they can show you God, you technically are doing a straw man, right? Again, steel man people, right? Don't argue things that other people are not arguing. If they're not saying, hey, look, I can show you God, then you really have no right to ask them to do so because that's not their claim. Think about this.
Oh, I see. I see.
And again, I'm trying to teach people to be rational thinkers. I don't care whether you're a theist or an atheist, whatever. If everybody was a rational thinker, then they're going to come to the conclusions on their own of whatever it is.
So she explained it earlier. You ask them what their God is first.
And that's fine. I have no problem with that. I think there's a problem when people start
What conversation you're trying to have, right? So if you're trying to have a conversation where a theist is trying to preach or be evangelical in a situation where they're already saying, hey, this is my God and this is what I already believe in, you can question them and be like, okay, where are you coming from? So that way we can now have a conversation.
Right.
The other way to do it is if you're having these more kind of general philosophical conversations where you wouldn't necessarily want to approach the conversation that way.
Yeah, and
I was more talking like I'm going to the cafe with my theist friend kind of conversation.
what does drive
Just
me
making
nuts
more
is when I
active.
hear an atheist try to retreat into what's called agnosticism. And agnosticism or atheism is basically a position where they feel like the term God is not cognitively meaningful. It's a really kind of difficult position for most people to try to actually have. The reason being is if you think that cognitively that God has no meaning, that word has no meaning, you shouldn't be involved in any of these discussions. You should be out playing golf or something. Yet I see them spend all day long talking about atheism, talking about theism, and I'm like, there's a performance contradiction here. You cannot claim to be an atheist and then all the time talk about God as a coherent, cognitive, meaningful proposition. It's like, it makes no sense to me. And so when I hear people say, well, you need to find God, look, I just have a stipulated definition of God. I basically use a supernatural being that is either a creating being or being with agency that can prescriptively change the laws of the universe or somehow manipulate the laws of physics. That's fine for me. Accept it, don't accept it. I'm not. There's something called a persuasive definition fallacy. Ever heard of that?
Not necessarily. No.
Okay.
No.
It's fine to have a stipulated definition. That's a working definition for an argument, right? Those are great. I am really a big fan. People call me a prescriptivist, like Matt Dillahunty calls me a prescriptivist. He's wrong, and he's lying about it because he's been corrected on it. 2 years running, he's been corrected on it. I'm not a prescriptivist. I'm what's called a descriptivist. And one of the things that tells people I'm a descriptivist is that I don't do the persuasive definition fallacy, which I see often. And what that fallacy is basically this: taking a stipulative definition and trying to convince people that it is actually the lexical type definition, or to use in an argument more than just stipulatively. T-Jump, if you know who he is, does this fantastically. He is the king of this fallacy. You know?
Kyle, would you like me to put your Twitter handle into the chat?
I suppose.
You can say no. You can say no.
Yes, you can.
I'm gonna ask you guys in the chat to do me a favor. Go to you guys know about the goblin with a sign. Make the sign say hashtag not all Kyles and at Kyle at that Twitter handle.
Or send the hate.
Ozzy's taking off. Good night, Ozzy. I'll catch up with him.
You won't get hate. I would like to point out real quick that I'm the great shadow person that was talking to you, by the way.
Okay, I had a feeling
that was me.
Yeah, the private thing. But
I have my account privated for completely separate reasons right now.
Yeah, when people, Kyle, when you hear my name, because my name's brought up in the atheist community a lot, because I'm the great atheist schism lord, I guess. You can tell I'm not a descriptivist. I don't tell people how to use words. I at all. I have my own usages, and other people out there is what I find is that they literally try to describe their usages to me. It was a guy coming on eventually. I'm supposed to have a debate with him. I don't know, but he is the head of the International Canadian Atheist Group. His name's Randolph Richardson, and this guy is a complete prescriptivist. He's like, no, these words are this. Steve is this. That's prescriptivism, and then they project it onto me because I don't do that. I don't tell somebody what they are. They can ask me, hey, given this information, what would be the probably the most normative word to describe this in philosophy? I could probably come up with something, but I don't say that's what you have to use. Like when I say, look, if this person's agnostic on the proposition, I'm not saying they have to call themselves agnostic. They can call themselves an atheist if they merely lack a belief. I don't use that. I lack a belief, but I'm not an atheist. I'm not a theist either. I'm neither.
The worst thing that Steve does is tell them that if you do use that definition, if you do try to do that, then you run into logical or philosophical problems. Now that doesn't mean you can't use it, and that doesn't mean you have to use Steve's definition. You could use another separate one entirely, or come up with a new one, or try and fix whatever potential holes you have in your position or in your argument. It's not prescribing what should and should not be or can or cannot be used. Just that, hey, if you call a dog a cat, then you might start running into some problems, right? Yeah. Because now you've got an entire canid that you're trying to describe all together that have very, very different behaviors.
And there's semantical distinctions, right? If I have semantical substitutions, that could change things dramatically and be very confusing to people. And so, like when Matt Dillahunty and Aaron Ra put out, look, you have to be an atheist or a theist. That's only if you accept their axioms in their organizations, then they have what's called a relative necessity. But it's not a true logical dichotomy in the form of a universal domain. It's called. You don't have to be. That's a fact. That's logic. That's philosophy. They don't tell people that. They neglect to mention that. They are trying to dishonestly convince people that you must be theist or atheist because they don't tell them that. Well, Aaron doesn't know better. Matt, I think, knows better. He doesn't care. I think he's just dishonestly not telling people that. But when the people that understand these topics, they're like, oh yeah, well, yeah, Steve's right on it. But then you get this atheist who says, well, Steve, you know what you're talking about. You have to be one or the other. No, you don't. you just don't.
There's we got a super chat from Kent Hoven's cellmate for $5. BRB, I need to remove some hashtag fuck Kyle signs in honor of an honorable Kyle.
No,
keep them up.
There. They only serve us in the end.
Thank you, Ken Hoven's cellmate. Is that related to Ken Hoven's lawyer? It's got to be.
Hopefully. We should probably wrap up, though.
Yeah, we're going to wrap this up. Kyle, hey, like I said, by the way, you watched a little bit of my discussion with Autumn, I think, right? Didn't you?
I was like trying to catch up and
so
figure out what was going on.
So you held your ground. I'm really kind of impressed, and I don't get really impressed.
Not really. The tectonic plates shifted, and we were neighbors for a second, and it was like scary. And then we had to figure out what our words were being used for to find common ground, and that's kind of why I come off the top rope on Twitter, because I want everyone to be passionate immediately.
Hey, look, I'm abrasive on Twitter. It's my dumpster fire. That's a way. I weed out the cattle and chattel. I mean, and I weed out the low hanging fruit and the white belts. I'm not interested in that crap. They're the people that are just so low that I don't like going back to first base all the time, right?
Right.
But we I don't know if you heard of this guy named Rick Delano. He made a movie called The Principle years ago, which was basically trying to show that the anthropic principle is wrong.
He's really bad at wrapping up.
Yeah, real quick. But anyways, if you really want to watch the dumpster fire, go watch my discussion with Rick Delano. Oh my God, was that horrifying? And it was so bad that even he recognized it was bad, and he wants to come back. And I'm like, and if I do, I'm gonna get Dapper Dino or something on. Him and a physicist. I need a quantum physicist to come on. But yeah, it was a horrifying experience.
Lawrence Krauss come and discuss some kind of dumpster fire conversation.
Krauss would lose his mind. Krauss does not suffer fools well.
No, God no. Rightly so.
But that's still the discussion I had with Lawrence Krauss was one of the best discussions I've ever had. Like literally the no boundary proposal. But anyways, let's wrap it up. Kyle, thanks. We're gonna put their link in the video description. We're gonna get that in there so people are gonna go follow you on Twitter if you're okay with that. You said.
Yep, it's already in there.
And we got Caffeine Corner tomorrow. Chess, what are we doing tomorrow?
For Caffeine Corner, we are talking about web platforming, how to platform somebody, the do's and don'ts, what to look out for, when do you not platform someone, when should you platform, are there any rules, and what's okay, what isn't okay, stuff like that, kind of go in the nuances of that. And we're also going to talk about the guilt by association. Mm-hmm. And like, how do you recognize guilt by association? What is guilt by association? What isn't? And how does that apply? And when it doesn't apply. And that'll be good. That'll be tomorrow. And also that time of the month will be on Tuesday. So that's going to be happening over on my channel. So go and check that out. And if any of you are not following me on Twitter right now, I am private. So you have to send me a request to follow if you do want to see the things I'm saying.
Yeah, by the way, go follow her on her channel and check out that time of the month, half time of the month, and spotting, because I think it's going to blow up. I think that because we're getting some big names that are recognizing our channels. We're going to be on what does she have? 188,000 subs.
Sherelle.
Yeah, so we're going to be on her channel next week, and this coming week, I think, somewhere in the next week or two. And that's
still working with the finer details.
Yeah. So go check out Cheshire's channel. All right, Kyle, we appreciate it, man. The rest of you guys have a good night, and we'll see you tomorrow for Caffeine Corner at 11 a.m. Pacific. Good night.